Bruce ran out on our wedding again for his childhood friend Lauren. It was the 7th time. Grandpa Sterling handed me $10 million as an apology, but Bruce just sneered into the speakerphone. Grandpa, she's not worth that much. You should invest that money in Lauren's gallery instead. Grandpa Sterling looked at me, an awkward apology drowning in his eyes. But I wasn't angry. Not one bit. I had accepted that kind of compensation 6 times already. This time, I wanted something that would actually cost Bruce his soul. I pointed to Kevin, Bruce's half-brother, the illegitimate son he hated most. Give him to me instead, I said, my voice steady. I'll marry him. The room went silent. Bruce had clearly forgotten the ironclad rule of the Sterling Group. Only the man married to me holds the right to become the heir. My family, the Changs, had been a laughingstock for 6 months because of his antics. No more. A few hours later, Bruce called, his voice dripping with casual arrogance. Aurora, stop being dramatic. I'm just taking Lauren out to relax, then I'll be back. You always wait. You know she needs me. I heard Lauren's sugary giggle in the background. I'm just testing her love for you, Bruce. I forced a smile they couldn't see. Are you really that confident I'll wait forever? Aurora, don't be petty, Bruce snapped. I even got you a gift. A photo popped up on my phone, a necklace dangling from his fingers. I recognized it instantly. Lauren had worn it to a gala last month. My gifts were always her leftovers, like the red watch he gave me that turned out to be her old repair project. To Bruce, I was a trash bin for Lauren's discarded things. I chose it myself, Lauren chirped before Bruce hung up. I turned to Grandpa Sterling. I want Kevin. I know he's complex and I know his background is messy, but I need leverage and he needs a throne. A new wedding was set for 1 week later. When I went to pick out new rings, I ran into the happy couple again. Bruce looked at me with pure vitriol. You actually convinced Grandpa to cut off my cards? Don't think that just because I'm back I'll marry you, Aurora. Stop tracking my movements. I'm not here for you, Bruce, I said flatly. He didn't listen. He saw the new wedding rings and scoffed, assuming they were for him. He grabbed my hand, noticing the faint mark where his old ring used to be. Where's the ring I carved for you? I threw it away. The day I decided to cancel the wedding, I tossed it in the trash, right where it belongs. His face darkened. Stop the drama, I said I'd marry you. He then grabbed the new ring and handed it to Lauren. Try it on, Lauren. This style isn't right for Aurora anyway. When I tried to take it back, Bruce shoved me. I slammed into the corner of a marble table, a searing pain lancing through my back. He didn't even flinch. He just scooped up Lauren and walked out, leaving me gasping for air. The morning of the wedding, Bruce showed up at the hotel, not to marry me, but to destroy me. He brought workers to dismantle the flower arches and tear down the decor. I told you we aren't getting married yet, he roared. Until Lauren gives her approval, this wedding isn't happening. Then Lauren walked in. She was wearing my custom wedding dress, the one that took 2 years to make. She twirled, mocking me with every stitch. It's so pretty, Bruce insisted I try it on. Take it off, I said, my voice dangerously low. You haven't even married into the family and you're acting like a queen, Bruce sneered. Burn it all, dismantle every bit of this venue, let her learn her lesson. He watched with a smirk as a worker carried out a portrait of the groom. He thought he was winning. He thought he was tearing down my dreams. Put that painting down, I commanded. Who are you to tell them what to do? Bruce laughed. I'm the heir. Not anymore. The doors swung open. Grandpa Sterling walked in, flanked by a team of lawyers and Kevin, who looked more like a king than Bruce ever could. The paperwork is signed, Bruce, Grandpa said, his voice cold as ice. As of this morning, you are removed from all positions within the Sterling Group. Kevin is the new heir, and today, he is the one Aurora is marrying. The smirk slid off Bruce's face. He looked at Lauren in my dress, then at the ruins of the venue he had just ordered his own workers to destroy. He had just demolished his own coronation. You're marrying him, Bruce stammered, his face turning a sickly shade of gray. I walked up to him, stepping over a pile of discarded flowers. You told me I've managed these situations many times before, Bruce. You were right. I managed this one perfectly. Security. I pointed to Bruce and Lauren. Get these trespassers out of my wedding. And Lauren, leave the dress. It's too expensive for a beggar to wear. The silence that followed Grandpa Sterling's announcement was thick, suffocating, and tasted of the dust Bruce's workers had kicked up while tearing down my decorations. Bruce stood frozen, his hand still raised in a gesture of command that had suddenly lost all its teeth. The new heir? Bruce's voice was a strangled whisper, the sound of a man watching the ground vanish beneath his feet. He looked at the legal documents in Grandpa's hand, then at Kevin, who stood beside me like a silent, predatory shadow. Grandpa, you're joking, you're senile. You can't give the company to a bastard just because Aurora threw a tantrum. Watch your tongue, Grandpa Sterling snapped, his voice crackling with a regal fury I hadn't seen in years. This bastard has spent the last 5 years quietly stabilizing the European markets while you were busy chasing starlets and burning through your trust fund. And this tantrum is a woman finally realizing her worth. Bruce turned to me, his eyes bloodshot, his face contorting into a mask of pure, unadulterated rage. You did this. You manipulated him. You think you're smart, Aurora. You're nothing. You're a placeholder. You think Kevin actually wants you. He's using you to get to my seat. Kevin stepped forward then, his presence so commanding that Bruce instinctively flinched. Kevin didn't scream. He didn't need to. He leaned in, his voice a low, vibrating hum that seemed to rattle the very air. I don't need to use her to get your seat, Bruce. I already took it. And as for Aurora, unlike you, I actually know how to value a diamond when it's handed to me. Lauren, who had been standing behind Bruce in my wedding dress, finally seemed to process that the golden goose had been slaughtered. Her eyes darted around the room, landing on the reporters who were already snapping photos through the glass doors. Bruce, do something, she shrieked, her sugary voice turning into a shrill, grating sound. They're taking your cards, my gallery, the villa in France you promised me. You said you were the king of Sterling. Shut up, Lauren, Bruce barked, the stress finally causing him to snap at his precious sister figure. I stepped closer to them, my heels clicking rhythmically on the marble floor, the only sound in the room besides Bruce's heavy, panicked breathing. I looked at Lauren, standing there in the dress I had waited 2 years for. The silk was wrinkled, and she had stained the hem with the dirt from the dismantled archway. The dress, Lauren, I said, my voice eerily calm. It's a $500,000 custom piece. It was designed for a bride, not a parasite. Take it off, now. Lauren backed away, clutching the bodice. You can't make me. Bruce, tell her. Bruce can't tell anyone to do anything in this building anymore, I reminded her. I looked over at the head of security, a man Bruce had treated like a servant for years. Chief Miller, these two are trespassing. They are no longer on the guest list. In fact, they are banned from all Sterling and Cheng properties indefinitely. Chief Miller stepped forward, a grimly satisfied smile touching his lips. He signaled to 4 large men. With pleasure, Miss Cheng. Don't you touch me, Bruce screamed as the guards moved in. He tried to swing at Miller, but the security chief caught his arm effortlessly, twisting it behind his back. The heir of Sterling was forced to his knees in the middle of the wreckage he had created. Aurora, you bitch, you'll regret this. You'll be begging me to come back when Kevin tosses you aside. I've spent 7 years begging you for the bare minimum, Bruce, I said, leaning down so only he could hear me. Watching you crawl in the dirt is the only apology I'll ever accept. And don't worry, I'll make sure the video of you being hauled out like common trash is the first thing people see on the evening news. Wait, my things, Lauren screamed as a guard grabbed her by the arm, dragging her toward the exit. This dress is worth more than your lives. Let go of me. The dress stays, I commanded. I signaled to my 2 female assistants. They didn't hesitate. They stepped forward and with cold efficiency began to unfasten the intricate silk ties at the back. Lauren struggled, sobbing and cursing, but she was trapped between the guards and the reality of her own insignificance. They stripped the gown off her right there in the foyer, leaving her shivering in nothing but her flimsy slip. My clothes, Bruce, give me your jacket, Lauren wailed. But Bruce couldn't help her. He was being hauled toward the grand entrance, his designer shoes scuffing the floor, his face purple with humiliation. The reporters outside saw them coming. The flashes began to go off like a staccato of gunfire, pop, pop, pop. The doors swung open, and the cold, biting rain Bruce had ignored earlier slammed into them. The guards didn't just escort them out, they tossed them. Bruce tumbled onto the wet pavement, his expensive suit soaked instantly in the oily puddles of the hotel driveway. Lauren was shoved out right after him, landing in a heap of tangled lace and smeared makeup. I stood at the top of the stairs, Kevin at my side and Grandpa Sterling behind me. I looked down at them, the man who thought I was a trash bin and the woman who thought she could steal my life. Bruce looked up, his hair plastered to his forehead, his eyes wild. He looked at the cameras, then back at me, realizing that this wasn't just a breakup. It was a funeral. His social standing, his wealth, his future, it was all dead. Seal the doors, I told Miller, and tell the pianist to start. We have a wedding to finish. As the heavy gold-leafed doors began to creak shut, I saw Bruce scramble to his feet, trying to lung back inside, only to be blocked by the ironclad wall of security. The last thing I saw before the doors clicked shut was Lauren screaming at him, blaming him for the loss of the gallery, her voice disappearing into the roar of the rain. I turned to Kevin. He was watching me with an expression I couldn't quite read. It wasn't just triumph, it was something deeper, something hungrier. You're quite the director, Aurora, he murmured, offering me his arm. The theatrics were impeccable. That wasn't for the audience, Kevin, I said, taking his arm and feeling the solid, dangerous strength of him. That was for me. Now let's go give them a real show. The heavy thud of the doors closing on Bruce's screams was the most beautiful music I had heard in years. For a moment, the foyer was silent, save for the muffled, rhythmic pounding of the rain against the glass and the collective, held breath of the staff. I didn't let myself shake. I didn't let the adrenaline turn into a tremor. I turned to the head of the catering and floral teams, who were standing amidst the half-dismantled ruins of my wedding. You have 45 minutes, I said, my voice projecting a cold, diamond-hard authority. I want every petal back in place. I want the broken glass cleared. If a single guest sees a scuff on this marble, your contracts are void. Move. The staff exploded into motion. It was a frantic, silent ballet of restoration. I didn't watch them. I turned my gaze to Kevin. He was leaning against a mahogany pillar, watching me with a look of dark amusement. He didn't look like a backup groom. He looked like the man who had been waiting in the wings for the theater to catch fire so he could walk through the flames and claim the stage. "You're not wearing a tie," I noted, my eyes tracing the sharp lines of his jaw. "I didn't think I'd be getting married today," he replied, his voice a low, gravelly hum. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a silk tie black as obsidian. "But I'm a quick learner, Aurora. Is this to your liking?" "It'll do." I stepped closer, my fingers steady as I took the silk from him. I reached up, looping it around his neck. The proximity was electric. I could feel the heat radiating off him, a stark contrast to the icy rain that had just drenched Bruce. "Remember the deal, Kevin. This is a merger. You get the Sterling Group. I get the satisfaction of watching Bruce burn. Love is not on the itinerary." Kevin leaned down, his breath ghosting against my ear. "Love is for people who have something to lose. We're just gaining an empire. I can live with those terms." 45 minutes later, the doors to the main ballroom swung open. The air inside was thick with the scent of lilies and the sharp, metallic tang of gossip. 300 members of high society, the elite, the vultures, the people who had bet money on how many hours I would wait at the altar this time, all turned as one. The murmurs were a physical wall of sound. They had seen the headlines. The news had already broken. My phone, tucked into the silk folds of my backup dress, the one Lauren hadn't managed to ruin, was vibrating incessantly with alerts. Breaking, Sterling heir thrown out in the rain. Cheng heiress abandons tradition. Who is the mystery groom? The fall of Bruce Sterling, from palace to pavement. I walked down the aisle, not with the hesitant, hopeful step of a woman waiting for her captor to love her, but with the measured stride of a conqueror. My arm was linked in Kevin. The gasps were audible. "Is that the brother? The illegitimate one? Look at his eyes. He looks nothing like Bruce." I saw Mrs. Sterling, Bruce's mother, sitting in the front row. Her face was a ghostly white, her pearls clutched so tightly I thought they might snap. She looked at Kevin with a mixture of horror and realization. She knew that by choosing the man she had spent 20 years trying to hide, I had effectively erased her son from history. As we reached the altar, the priest looked hesitant, his eyes darting toward Grandpa Sterling. Grandpa gave a single, slow nod. The old man looked 10 years younger, his back straight, his eyes fixed on Kevin with a new, fierce pride. "We are gathered here today," the priest began, his voice wavering, "to witness the union of Aurora Cheng and Kevin Sterling." The room rippled again. The name change was official. When it came time for the vows, I didn't look at the priest. I looked directly into Kevin's eyes. They were a deep, stormy gray, swirling with secrets I hadn't yet unraveled. "I, Aurora Cheng," I said, my voice echoing through the silent hall, "take you, Kevin Sterling, to be my husband. To hold the line against our enemies, to build what was broken, and to ensure that the Sterling name finally carries the weight of honor." It wasn't a romantic vow. It was a declaration of war. Kevin's grip on my hands tightened. "I, Kevin Sterling, take you, Aurora Cheng. I promise you loyalty where there was betrayal and a partnership that the world will fear." When he slid the ring onto my finger, a massive emerald-cut diamond he had somehow produced in the last hour, it felt heavy. It felt like armor. "I now pronounce you husband and wife." Kevin didn't wait for the cue. He pulled me in, his hand cupping the back of my neck with a possessiveness that sent a shiver down my spine. The kiss wasn't the chaste, polite peck Bruce used to give me. It was deep, hungry, and tasted of victory. The ballroom erupted. Not with cheers, but with the frantic clicking of cameras and the sound of 100 socialites scrambling to update their status. By the time we reached the reception, the world had shifted on its axis. I took a seat at the head table, a glass of vintage champagne in my hand. My assistant, Bethany, leaned in, showing me her tablet. "Miss Cheng, excuse me, Mrs. Sterling, you're trending globally," she whispered, her eyes wide with excitement. "The video of Bruce being tossed out has 3 million views. The footage of you walking down the aisle with Kevin is being called the rebirth of the century." I scrolled through the comments. At Society Insider, "Aurora Cheng finally woke up and chose violence. We are here for it." At Luxury Watch, "Is that Kevin Sterling? Bruce was a flickering candle. This man is a forest fire." At Truth Seeker, "Did you see Lauren in the slip? Absolute peak cinema. The Cheng family isn't a laughingstock anymore. They're the directors." I looked across the room. Bruce's friends, the ones who used to mock me behind my back, the ones who helped him hide Lauren at his various getaways, were now lining up to shake Kevin's hand. They were terrified. They saw the shift in power, and they were scrambling to stay on the right side of the new regime. Kevin caught my eye from across the table. He raised his glass to me, a smirk playing on his lips. "How does it feel, Aurora?" he asked as he sat down beside me, his thigh brushing against mine. "To be the most talked-about woman in the world for all the right reasons." "It feels quiet," I said, realizing it was true. The constant, buzzing anxiety of "where is Bruce?" and "is Lauren with him?" had vanished. In its place was a cold, satisfying clarity. "This is only the beginning," Kevin murmured, his voice dropping an octave. "Bruce is currently at a police station trying to file a report for theft of his wedding. He's making a fool of himself on a national stage. By tomorrow morning, his reputation will be so toxic that even the dive bars won't take his shadow. And Lauren, I asked. She's at a motel, Kevin said, his smile widening. The guards didn't let her take her purse. She had to call a rideshare in a silk slip and Bruce's discarded raincoat. The driver took a selfie with her while she was crying. It's already on TikTok. I took a long sip of my champagne, the bubbles sharp and sweet. Good, I said. Now tell me, husband, what's our next move? The penthouse suite of the Sterling Grand was a cavern of opulence, draped in silk and bathed in the amber glow of a $1,000 candle arrangement. The silence here was different from the silence of the cathedral. There, it had been heavy with judgment. Here, it was thick with something far more dangerous, anticipation. I kicked off my heels, the cold marble floor a relief against my aching feet. The weight of the emerald-cut diamond on my finger felt like a lead weight, a constant reminder of the bargain I'd struck. I walked to the floor-to-ceiling window, looking out over the city lights. Somewhere out there, in a rain-slicked gutter or a cheap motel, Bruce was mourning his lost empire. The thought should have brought me peace, but instead, it left a jagged edge in my chest. Behind me, I heard the heavy thud of the suite's double doors locking. The sound of the deadbolt sliding into place sent a jolt of electricity up my spine. You can drop the act now, Kevin, I said, not turning around. My reflection in the glass showed a woman who looked like a queen but felt like a mercenary. The cameras are gone. Grandpa is satisfied. The merger is complete. I heard him move. Kevin didn't walk like Bruce. Bruce stomped with the entitlement of a man who owned the world. Kevin moved with the silent, fluid grace of a man who had spent his life navigating the shadows. When he spoke, his voice was right behind my ear, vibrating through the silk of my dress. Is that what this was to you, Aurora? A merger? I turned then, putting a deliberate 2 feet of space between us. He had discarded his jacket and loosened that obsidian tie. The top 2 buttons of his shirt were undone, revealing the hollow of his throat and the lean, hard muscle beneath. He looked less like a corporate savior and more like a hunter who had finally cornered his prize. That was the deal, I reminded him, my voice clipped. I needed a husband to secure the inheritance and destroy Bruce. You needed the Sterling name to legitimize your standing. We've achieved both. Tomorrow we start the process of restructuring the board. As for this, I gestured vaguely to the rose petals scattered across the king-sized bed. This is platonic, professional. You take the guest wing, I take the master. We are partners in business, Kevin, nothing more. Kevin didn't move away. Instead, he let out a low, dark chuckle that didn't reach his eyes. It was a sound of pure, amused disbelief. Platonic, he repeated, the word tasting like a joke on his tongue. He took a step forward, invading my space until I was pressed back against the cold glass of the window. You really think I stepped onto that altar today for a seat on the board? You think I took Bruce's place just to help you balance the ledgers? It's a logical arrangement, I stammered, my composure flickering. You've wanted the Sterling Group your whole life. I gave it to you on a silver platter. I've wanted the Sterling Group for 10 years, Aurora, Kevin said, his voice dropping to a dangerous, velvety whisper. He reached out, his hand hovering just inches from my face before his fingers grazed the line of my jaw. I should have pulled away, but I felt paralyzed by the intensity in his gaze. But do you have any idea how long I've wanted you? My heart hammered against my ribs like a trapped bird. Don't be ridiculous. We've barely spoken 10 words to each other in a decade. You were always the problem Brother Bruce kept in the basement of the company. I was the brother who watched, Kevin countered. His eyes searched mine, burning with a fire that had clearly been smoldering for a long, long time. I watched you wait for him at every gala while he was in the coach room with Lauren. I watched you buy him gifts he never opened and defend him to a press that laughed at you. I watched you waste the best years of your life on a man who wasn't fit to lace your shoes. He leaned in closer, his forehead almost touching mine. Every time I saw him make you cry, I had to physically restrain myself from breaking his neck. Not because of the company, Aurora, because of you. I sat in those board meetings and watched you lead with more brilliance than any Sterling man, only to see you dim your own light so Bruce wouldn't feel small. You're lying, I breathed, though the sheer conviction in his voice made my lungs ache. This is just another play. You want to make sure I don't change my mind about the shares. Kevin laughed again, but this time it was bitter. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small, weathered piece of paper. He unfolded it and held it out to me. It was a photo, an old, candid shot of me from a charity auction 7 years ago. I was laughing, looking away from the camera, before the light had gone out of my eyes. I didn't steal this from a file, Aurora. I took it myself, from the balcony. He tucked it away, his expression hardening. I didn't wait for Bruce to fail. I helped him fail. Who do you think leaked the photos of him and Lauren in the Maldives last month? Who do you think made sure Grandpa Sterling found out about the embezzled gallery funds? My eyes widened. You orchestrated his downfall. I gave him enough rope to hang himself, and he was happy to do it, Kevin said. He took my hand, his thumb stroking the back of my knuckles in a way that made my skin tingle. I've been playing the long game for a decade, waiting for the moment you finally realized that Bruce was trash. I didn't marry you for the company, Aurora. I took the company so that I could finally be in a position to take you. I felt the world tilting. The man I thought I had used as a tool for revenge had actually been the one pulling the strings all along. He wasn't my pawn. I was the queen he had spent 10 years trying to capture. This doesn't change anything, I whispered, though my voice lacked conviction. It's still a business arrangement. I don't love you, Kevin. I don't need your love yet, he said, his eyes dropping to my lips. The air between us was thick enough to drown in. I've waited 10 years to have you under my roof, wearing my name. I can wait a little longer for the rest, but don't you dare call this platonic. He leaned down, his lips brushing against the shell of my ear. Because tonight, for the first time in 7 years, you aren't the woman Bruce ditched. You're the woman I finally won, and I have no intention of letting you sleep in the guest wing. He pulled back just enough to look me in the eye, a challenge written in every sharp line of his face. So, Aurora, are we going to keep pretending this is just about stocks and shares? Or are you going to admit that you felt exactly what I felt the moment our lips touched at that altar? I looked at him, really looked at him, and saw the hunger, the calculated patience, and the dark, simmering devotion. For years, I had been starved for a man who actually saw me. And here he was, the bastard brother, admitting he had burnt down the world just to stand next to me. The revenge against Bruce was sweet, but this was a different kind of fire. The doors are locked, Kevin, I said, my voice finally finding its strength. I reached up, my fingers curling into the collar of his shirt, pulling him back down toward me. And I think I'm done with being a good girl who waits for permission. The sun rose over the city with a cold, unforgiving clarity. If the night before had been a dream of silk and whispered revelations in the penthouse, the morning was a battlefield of steel and glass. I woke up to the smell of expensive espresso and the sight of Kevin standing by the window, already dressed in a charcoal suit that looked like it had been forged rather than tailored. He looked over his shoulder, a predatory smirk tugging at his lips when he saw me watching him. "The board is waiting, Mrs. Sterling," he said, the title rolling off his tongue with a deliberate, possessive weight. "And I believe your ex-fiancé is currently throwing a tantrum in the lobby that would put a toddler to shame." I didn't rush. I took my time, dressing in a sharp, cream-colored power suit that screamed authority. I chose the blood-red lipstick Bruce used to hate because it was too aggressive. Today, aggression was the point. When our black sedan pulled up to the curb of the Sterling Group headquarters, the scene was even more chaotic than Kevin had promised. A swarm of reporters was held back by a line of stone-faced security guards, their cameras flashing like 1,000 strobe lights. And there, in the center of the storm, was Bruce. He looked unhinged. He was still wearing the same suit from the day before, now wrinkled and stained with dried rainwater. His hair was a mess, and his eyes were bloodshot, darting around like a trapped animal. Beside him, Lauren was huddled in a cheap, oversized hoodie, looking like a drowned rat, her sugary persona replaced by a mask of shivering desperation. "Aurora," Bruce screamed as I stepped out of the car. He tried to lung forward, but Chief Miller, the same man who had tossed him out of the hotel, blocked him with a single meaty hand. "Aurora, tell them this is a mistake. I was drunk, I wasn't thinking. You can't just give the company to him." I didn't stop. I walked toward the glass doors, Kevin's hand resting firmly on the small of my back. The heat of his palm was a silent anchor. "Aurora, look at me," Bruce wailed, his voice cracking. "We were together for 7 years. You love me. You've always waited for me. You can't let this bastard steal my life." I stopped just inches from him, protected by the invisible barrier of security. I looked at him, really looked at him, and wondered how I had ever mistaken this fragile, arrogant boy for a man. "You're right, Bruce," I said, my voice carrying through the sudden hush of the crowd. "I did wait for you. 7 times I stood at an altar and let you turn me into a punchline. I waited for you to grow up, to be loyal, to be worthy of the name you carry. But you never did, so I stopped waiting." "It was Lauren," Bruce pointed a shaking finger at the woman beside him. "She manipulated me. She told me she was sick, that she needed me. Aurora, I'll fire her. I'll never see her again. Just take me back. Tell Grandpa the wedding with Kevin was just a stunt to teach me a lesson." Lauren's head snapped up, her eyes wide with betrayal. "Bruce, you're blaming me." "Shut up, Lauren," he barked, not even looking at her. "Aurora, honey, please, we can fix this. Think about our future. Think about the kids we talked about." "The kids you wanted to have while your sister lived in the guest house?" I asked, a cold laugh bubbling up. "There is no future, Bruce. There is only the audit." Kevin stepped forward then, his presence instantly eclipsing Bruce's frantic energy. He looked down at Bruce with a pity that was more insulting than any insult. "The audit started at 6:00 a.m., Bruce," Kevin said calmly. "We've already found the discrepancies in the French acquisition. The $5 million you invested in Lauren's gallery, that's embezzlement of corporate funds. You aren't just losing your job today, you're likely losing your freedom." Bruce's face went from pale to a sickly, translucent white. "What? No, Grandpa wouldn't. He wouldn't call the police on his own grandson." "Grandpa didn't," Kevin murmured, leaning in close so only Bruce could hear the final nail in the coffin. "I did. As the new CEO, it's my fiduciary duty to report criminal activity, even if it comes from the trash we just swept out of the lobby." We left Bruce screaming on the sidewalk as the glass doors slid shut behind us, sealing out the noise of his collapse. Inside, the atmosphere was electric. Employees stood at their desks, paralyzed, watching as Kevin and I marched toward the executive elevators. This wasn't just a change in leadership, it was a regime change. The boardroom was filled with the 12 members of the Sterling Group board, men who had spent years nodding along to Bruce's whims because they feared his grandfather. Now, they looked like they were sitting in a courtroom awaiting sentencing. Kevin took the head of the table. I took the seat to his right, the seat Bruce used to leave empty so he could keep his bag on it. "Gentlemen," Kevin began, opening a sleek black folder. "Yesterday, the Sterling Group was a playground for a spoiled child. Today, it is a global competitor. If you are here because you value the company, you have nothing to fear. If you are here because you helped my brother hide his expenses, I suggest you have your resignations on my desk by noon." One of the older board members, a longtime ally of Bruce's father, cleared his throat. "Now see here, Kevin. Aurora, this is all very sudden. Surely we can discuss a transition period." "The transition period ended when the police arrived at the front door 10 minutes ago," I interrupted, sliding a tablet across the table. It showed a live feed of the lobby. Outside, 2 officers were currently snapping handcuffs onto Bruce's wrists. He was crying now, his knees buckling as they led him toward a squad car. Lauren was being questioned by a female officer, her face buried in her hands. The board members stared at the screen in horrified silence. "The Cheng family's shares, combined with the Sterling Trust's new designation, give us a 62% controlling interest," I continued, my voice as sharp as a guillotine. "We aren't here to negotiate. We are here to announce the new direction. Kevin is CEO. I am the chair of the board. Any questions?" There were no questions, only the sound of pens hitting paper as 3 men realized their time was up. By mid-afternoon, the Sterling Group was unrecognizable. The locks had been changed, the reserved signs for Bruce's private elevator had been scraped off, and a new memo had been sent out. All gallery investments are suspended pending criminal investigation. I stood in the CEO's office, Bruce's old office, watching as movers hauled out his mahogany desk and his collection of vintage sports memorabilia. "It smells like his cologne in here," I noted, wrinkling my nose. "We'll burn the carpet if we have to," Kevin said, walking up behind me. He wrapped his arms around my waist, his chin resting on my shoulder. "Everything he touched is being purged, Aurora. This is our house now." My phone buzzed. It was a message from an unknown number, likely a burner phone. "Aurora, please help me. They won't set bail. Grandpa won't pick up the phone. Lauren left me. She took the last of my cash and vanished. I'm alone. I'm so sorry. I love you." I looked at the screen for a long moment. I remembered the red watch. I remembered the 7 weddings. I remembered the pain in my lower back from where he had shoved me into a marble counter just days ago. I didn't reply. I didn't even block the number. I simply handed the phone to Kevin. "Evidence for the prosecution," I said. Kevin smiled, a slow, dark, satisfied look. He deleted the message and tossed the phone onto the new desk. "He's a ghost, Aurora. Stop looking at the graveyard." He turned me around in his arms, his gaze intense and unyielding. "Now that the trash has been collected, I believe we have a honeymoon to attend to, and I promise you there won't be a single childhood friend in sight." I looked into the eyes of the man who had waited 10 years to take me, the man who had dismantled an empire just to prove he was the better choice. I wasn't the waiting girl anymore. I was the architect of my own life. "Let's go," I said, leaning into him. "I've had enough of this office for one day." The final chapter of my life as the waiting girl ended the moment the prison doors clanged shut on Bruce Sterling. But the story of the Sterling Cheng Empire was only just beginning. 6 months had passed since the wedding that shook the nation. The headlines had moved on, but the consequences remained etched in stone. The golden boy of the Sterling family was now inmate 4892. The embezzlement charges, combined with tax evasion and a slew of reckless corporate malfeasance Kevin had unearthed, had led to a swift and brutal conviction. Without the Sterling name to protect him, Bruce was just another man in a jumpsuit. I visited him once, not out of love, but for closure. He looked gaunt, his skin sallow from the lack of sunlight and high-end skincare. He sat behind the plexiglass, his eyes filling with a pathetic, desperate hope when he saw me. "Aurora," he croaked, pressing his palm against the glass. "You came. You knew I didn't mean it. Tell Kevin to drop the civil suit. I have nothing left. They took the cars, the penthouse. I'm living on commissary credit." "I didn't come to help you, Bruce," I said, my voice echoing in the sterile room. "I came to show you what you threw away." I held up my hand, the light catching the massive diamond on my finger, and something more, the glow of a woman who was finally, truly happy. "The board just reported a 200% increase in profits. Kevin and I are expanding into the Asian markets. Everything you thought you owned is now thriving because you're no longer there to poison it." "I loved you," he whimpered. "No." I corrected him firmly. "You loved having someone to come home to after you were done with Lauren. You loved the safety of me. But safety is gone, Bruce. Enjoy the silence." I walked away without looking back. His screams for me to wait were muffled by the heavy steel doors. For the first time, I didn't stop. I didn't even slow down. Lauren's karma. Lauren, ever the parasite, hadn't fared much better. When the money dried up and the Sterling name became toxic, her celebrity friends vanished. She had tried to sue for a severance package, claiming she was an unofficial consultant for the company. Kevin's legal team hadn't just defeated her, they had countersued for the return of every gift Bruce had bought her with company funds. The last I heard, she was working at a mid-tier boutique in a city far away, selling clothes similar to the ones she used to tear off my back. Every time a woman walked in wearing a Cheng-designed suit, it was a reminder of the life she could have had if she hadn't been so intent on stealing mine. I returned to the Sterling penthouse that evening. The rain was falling again, but this time I wasn't watching it through a window of loneliness. Kevin was on the balcony, a glass of dark amber liquid in his hand, looking out over the empire we had built together. He didn't hear me come in, but he sensed me. He always did. "He's still the same," I said, leaning against the doorframe. Kevin turned, his expression softening, a look he reserved only for me. "He'll always be the same, Aurora. Some people are born to be warnings, not examples." I walked over to him, taking the glass from his hand and setting it on the table. I stepped into his space, the heat of him pulling me in like a tide. For 6 months, we had lived in a state of high-octane partnership. We were the most powerful couple in the city, but there was still a lingering shadow, the question of whether this was all just a very successful business transaction. "Kevin," I whispered, my hands finding the lapels of his jacket. "You told me on our wedding night that you wanted me for 10 years. "I did," he said, his voice dropping an octave, his hands settling on my waist with a possessiveness that still made my heart skip. "And I've spent every day of the last 6 months trying to prove it wasn't just talk. I'm done with business deals," I said, looking him dead in the eye. "I'm done with leverage and shares. I don't want a partner anymore." Kevin's eyes darkened, a flash of fear, or perhaps anticipation, crossing his face. "Aurora." "I want a husband," I finished. "For real this time. No more ghosts of Bruce, no more revenge plots, just us." The silence on the balcony was broken only by the distant hum of the city. Kevin looked at me with an intensity that felt like it was stripping away every layer of armor I had left. He reached out, his thumb tracing the curve of my bottom lip. "You have no idea," he murmured, "how hard I've worked to not scare you away with how much I actually love you. I thought if I moved too fast, you'd think I was just another man trying to own you." "You don't own me, Kevin," I smiled, pulling him closer until there wasn't a breath of air between us. "You earned me." He didn't wait for another word. He kissed me, not with the triumph of a conqueror, but with the raw, desperate honesty of a man who had finally come home. It was a kiss that tasted of the future, of boardrooms and quiet mornings, of power and peace. Bruce had left me at the altar 7 times. But in the end, he had handed me the greatest gift of all, the path to the man who would never let me wait a second longer. The Sterling Group was ours. The city was ours. And finally, my heart was mine again, given freely to the only man who knew exactly what it was worth.